Hey folks, and welcome back to West Yorkshire Retro Gamer. It pains me and saddens me to report that unfortunately my beloved Leeds United have suffered a loss today, losing 2-1 against Tottenham Hotspur. But the result alone doesn't tell the whole story. For big portions of the match, Leeds were the better team. And it's yet another woulda, coulda, shoulda type situations. And again, on the balance of play, you couldn't have really argued if Leeds had come away with at least a draw in this one. So should we be at least 4 points better off now? Maybe so. The statistics, of which I'll show some of them to you in a moment, would suggest that Leeds could have even won the game had Leeds been more clinical. And this lack of clinicism is really getting on my nerves, just purely for the fact that I worry that we don't want to get to the end of the season and rue the dropped points. Leeds got themselves back to 1-1 and realistically should have been able to then either hold out for 1-1 or, when it got to 2-2, be good enough to actually level it up. And when I think of it all, again, Leeds have proven today that we are not out of place in the Premier League. It's a very narrow loss, in the scheme of things. And again, from a statistical point of view, we have matched Spurs in a lot of areas. But, in recent times, you have to wonder if we've sacrificed a little bit of that defensive solidarity, however you want to pronounce it, sacrifice some of that to try and attack more. And there's no doubt we are attacking more. And we've now got 6 goals in 3 games. A 3-1 win against Wolves, a 2-2 draw with Bournemouth, and now this 2-1 loss against Spurs. But if we are going to start scoring goals, we've still got to keep it tight to the back. And you could argue that 2 of the most unluckiest players on the pitch today were Caldalo and Pascal Strout. Pascal ended up being on the wrong end of 2 deflections that made it more difficult for Caldalo to save the 2 shots that came in that led to Tottenham's goals. It's hard to take as this one. Before a ball had been kicked, we could possibly have seen this one as maybe being not necessarily a write-off, but and again, not even a free hit, but at least one where before a ball had been kicked, you wouldn't have been stupidly disappointed if we'd have lost it. When you compare the stature of the teams, not the clubs, but the teams, as this thing currently stands. I mean, at the end of the day, the newly promoted team tag, we'll get that all season. But it only stays as a reason for so long. You can't then use it, the longer it goes on, the more it becomes an excuse rather than a reason. And that ain't going to wash. So, I don't want to be stupidly critical, but I feel that I am a fairly balanced fan. You know, I'm not a happy clapper, and I'm not a doom and gloom merchant. You know, I try to be as balanced and as middle as I can be with these things. But today hurts because again, it's one of these where you could argue we didn't get what we deserved. But that's maybe 3 matches where we didn't get what we deserve now. And that's you've got to have a look at that and say to yourself, how many more times is this going to happen this season where we don't get what we deserve? Maybe some of this needs to be counted where we actually get a win that we don't deserve. And say, well, all right, we didn't deserve it, but we've won. We'll take the points. It swings and roundabouts. People argued that we were only good for a draw against Everton. But, the Everton match is a long time ago now. That was the first game of the season. This is the 7th match of the season. So, let's delve into this a little more. So, as you can see on the screen there, it is another early kick-off that Leeds have failed to get anything from. They don't traditionally do very well on early kick-offs. But again, that to me is more of an excuse than a reason. They've just got to get around that. They've got to find a way to get around that hoodoo or whatever you want to call it. But it's not a good trend. Our recent record against Tottenham as well hasn't been amazing. So that again is, it's disappointing that we weren't able to kind of break that kind of problem, that we've had against Tottenham in recent times. So, let's have a little look at things. We'll look at the table last, because that's a live table on Tottenham. So, let's have a look at some statistics. Now, there'll be a lot of this that Leeds can take a lot of credit from and take a lot of, take some positives from. And it it kind of outlines that Leeds were in the game quite considerably. For large chunks of it as well. Had more possession, more XG, albeit I have mixed feelings on XG. It's the total shots and shots on target that mean more to me, really, rather than an XG. But we had more shots, we had more on target, ever so slightly, more big chances, but unfortunately more big chances missed. Comfortably beat them on accurate passes. Spurs were more dirty with 12 fouls compared to 10 on Leeds. Leeds had 4 corners. Didn't do enough with them. Came very close, but didn't do enough. In terms of some more shot information, both teams had 2 shots blocked. Both teams hit the woodwork. You see, Leeds had a lot of shots inside the box today. So yeah, I don't know. If you're going to be this good with getting shots on target and everything, why aren't we scoring more? Was Vicario a world beater today? I wouldn't have said so. He did make a couple of good saves, I'll give him that. But certainly very early on in the match, Vicario, the Spurs goalkeeper, looked very dodgy. I was just thinking to myself, if Leeds could just press, get that nice quick high press on them, put some pressure on Vicario in the defence. For a very brief period we did at the start of the match. First 5-10 minutes I felt we started well. And then for some reason, I don't know if the players just started giving Spurs a bit too much respect, but it got to the point where, when Leeds had possession, they looked quite dangerous at times. We looked decent, we really did. And then, on the occasions where Spurs got possession, you started to worry a little bit. They had a couple of moments where I'm just sat here thinking, how the bloody hell have they gotten past us that easily? Probably a combination of a little bit of skill or a little bit of technique from Spurs and I won't call it a switching off from the Leeds defence. I'd just call it maybe a lack of aggression. Obviously it's got to be controlled aggression. You don't want to give them free kicks in dangerous areas and stuff like that. You don't want to get yellow and red cards from being too aggressive. But you can't just let them through like that. And this happened on a couple of occasions. The defence either got outpaced or they got done in. I'm just sat here thinking, bloody hell, on another day we might have been in a bit of trouble. You've got to say, from a Spurs point of view, if they had a world-class striker, they'd probably be quite good. As in they are currently second in the table, but you would say, with a world-class striker in there, maybe a better goalkeeper as well. Tottenham could be really up there. And despite all of that, as I say, Leeds today matched and were more than a match for Spurs in a lot of areas. As you can see there, the attacking stats suggest that Leeds were the better team, but that doesn't reflect in the scoreline, and the scoreline is the only thing that's important with all of this, really. Again, all the data with the expected goals, the XG, it's there for you all to see. It's just, it's a clean sweep as far as Leeds is concerned. Passing stats, again, according to this, Leeds the better team. This is against a team that's just played in a European competition. And you wouldn't have said, like at the start of the season, you might, some people might have thought, right, Spurs going to be top 5 and Leeds going to be bottom 5. Well, you wouldn't then think that was the case in terms of, actual positioning, in terms of the difference in quality between the two teams. So you could see certain aspects of Tottenham where there was additional quality. There's no doubt about that. But it wasn't like the Arsenal match where we got destroyed. Far from it. Leeds were always in this game. And we had enough chances to score the goals that we needed. I said Spurs would be half decent if they had a world-class striker. If Leeds had a world-class striker right now, I'll tell you, we'd be in really good shape right now. I'm not saying we're in bad shape right now, far from it. But if we had someone that could put the ball in the back of the net on a regular basis, well, you're talking a different outcome today, I'll tell you that much. Not a lot happened really in terms of cards. 2 versus 3. No reds given. Duels. again, that to me, that might be the one that sticks out the most out of all of this. The rest of it's relatively even, there's not a massive difference there. But that's quite telling. Because again, in the Leeds squad at the moment, there's Okafor, who in the first half, he probably got those 3 successful dribbles on his own. Second half, he got done a couple of times. So anyway, in terms of the statistics, well, we know that Tottenham's biased. So there's going to be a lot more Tottenham in this than there is going to be Leeds. But it suggests that Kudus, who... You see, I'm a bit conflicted on this one. Did Gudmundsson have a bad game? Did Kudus have a good game? Or was it a bit of both? I'd have to say a bit of both. I don't think it was Gudmundsson's strongest game of the season so far. Again, minus the Arsenal one, that one was just a freak event in the end, unfortunately. But in the scheme of things, it has to be said that Kudus, Tell, and Simons, that they were the 3 most attacking players that they had. And I would say that maybe Van der Ven was probably their best defender as well. He seemed to be quite annoying for Leeds forwards. I thought there was a couple of moments where Polinia could have got himself sent off just for giving a bit too much of that. And then might have been Kudus. It might have actually been Kudus. If he'd have done one more dodgy foul, he might have been off. I can't remember. It was one of their front guys or one of the wingers, and he definitely he got himself booked and then did another foul which the ref gave nothing for. I'll just point this out as well. And again, it's not an excuse. We had enough chances to win this game today, let alone draw it. But the ref did not help. And we're not asking the ref to help. What we're asking the ref to do is to show consistency. And he was far from it. Absolutely far from it. But I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I'll let other content creators comment more on the ref. But he was poor. So as you can see, with the just with the greens upwards, they've given Longstaff a green rating. They've given Okafor a green rating. Okafor certainly first half, yeah, good half from Noah Okafor, to be fair. Longstaff, I thought it was alright. Bearing in mind these stats, everything you see on FotMob is all algorithm based. It's what these statistics come up with and what we see visually, can look a lot different. You see, I thought that in the first half, I actually thought that Brendan Aronson and Joe Rodon were Leeds' 2 best players. Says a lot. Simons was quite dangerous, albeit he didn't. He looked frustrated throughout the match quite a lot, actually. And he's been given a relatively low rating. Didn't think that much of Odobert. Or Doggy, to be honest. I thought they were okay. I felt, as I say, it was Tell and Simons and Kudus. Those 3 kind of stood out from a Spurs point of view for me. You see, Pascal's got a 5.8, and he's probably been given, you've got Pascal with a Gudmundsson, Gary's ended up with a 5.7, Carl's ended up with a 5.3. It's a bit harsh, really. But then, on the flip side, it's like, well, who's responsible? Any manager will come out and basically say, well, we lose as a team and we win as a team and we draw as a team and all this kind of thing. But certain things have to be questioned at certain points, I'm just hurting. I'm just hurting from this loss because we really didn't play badly. And we've gone toe to toe with a team that are expected to be in the top 5 this season, and come away with a performance that, in large spells, on any other given day, Leeds would have had the win, let alone a draw. And again, you could definitely say that Leeds deserved a draw there as a minimum. So it is hard to take. If we have a quick look at the lineups, again, no surprises that Leeds started with the same lineup again. This lineup's been doing alright so far, haven't they, really? And we were still without Lucas Perry, Willie Gnonto and Dan James. So with that in mind, there's not a lot you can change with it, really. So, that wasn't much of a surprise. In terms of the Spurs team, there's a couple on here that weren't included on the lineup that I put out, but the lineup I put out didn't have any width. In terms of my predicted lineup for Spurs, and again, when I do these predicted lineups for the opposition, I just go with the players that have played the most. And we have to assume that they played the most for a reason. So there was a few changes in this lineup compared to the 11 that I mentioned on my preview video of this match. And I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. That side of things doesn't bother me. I don't do any research on the opposition. I'm just focused on Leeds United. That's all I'm bothered about. So let's have a quick talk. I'll just quickly go through the lineup then. As I say, Darlow and Strout both unlucky today. With the deflections on the shots that got the 2 Spurs goals. On another day, the deflections either go high or wide. Or they take enough power out of the shot for Carl to be able to save. It's just one of those. As I say, on the eye test, I felt it was one of Gabby Gudmundsson's weaker games, but it was against a winger that's just cost Tottenham about 55 million quid, and it's a winger that has played a couple of seasons in the Premier League already, so he's you could say that he's reasonably experienced at this level now. Of which, ironically, Kudus ended up with a Tottenham man of the match. Again, that doesn't mean a vast amount in the scheme of things. Stack, yeah, probably not one of his better games either. I think just looking at it, the 3 midfielders overall, it wasn't amazing from them today. I thought Joe Rodon had a very good first half. After Brendan Harrison, I thought he was our next best player in that first half. Joe was very good. Should have, should have probably scored a goal in this match. The header that he had, quite close range. Didn't get on target in the end. Came off the woodwork, I think. But again, a couple of other content creators have said it's fine margins, and they're right. If the Rodon attempt goes in, it's a different ball game at that point. Jadon Bogle, thought he did alright. I didn't think Odobert looked all that great, or a doggy. A doggy got forward a couple of times, in fairness to him. But from an Odobert point of view, I think Bogle held his own there. As I say, I'm not convinced that it was Leeds' midfield's best match of the season. A couple of recent games, the midfield have done really, really well. Today, maybe slightly off it. And then in terms of Okafor and Aronson, I thought first half in particular, I thought Brendan was excellent. I really do. He was trying to combine an element of attacking and defending in equal measure, and look very bright. And does seem to be getting. He seems to be physically stronger now than he was the last time. Last time a gust of wind would blow him over. Now it's taken an actual genuine challenge to knock him over, and he won a couple of free kicks. Throughout the half, and as I say, and he had Brendan had a good involvement in Leeds' goal as well. So I do feel it was a good game for Brendan today. Played quite well. Noah obviously got the goal. It's an easy tap in from that range, but I did feel that Noah was dangerous. For quite a few aspects of the game. DCL, again, he's had one or two good chances to score. There was one where he took about half a dozen touches before shooting. He only needs to take a maximum of 2 touches instead of 4, 5, 6, whatever it was. Honestly, just get it under control and let rip. He's had quite a lot of goal scoring opportunities in recent games as DCL. He's got to start putting them away. He's got to start scoring. At the end of the day, he's come to Leeds. Farke's made him the first choice number 9. He's got to start having a goal return now. He has to. There are good aspects of Calvert-Lewin's game. There's no doubt about it. And he did well to last the entire match after he took a heavy knock in the first half, and I thought Metro had come on at half time. I was surprised that Calvert-Lewin was able to shrug it off, because at one point he was hobbling, he was limping. So he did well to shake it off, but he needs to score, and he needs to score more often. It just feels like a Bamford 2.0 in a certain way. It took Patrick between 5 and 10 chances to score a goal. It's taking Dominic Calvert-Lewin 5 or 10, between 5 and 10 chances before he scores a goal. And that ain't good enough. You could argue, well, we got him on a free. Well, that was just because of his contract situation. Regardless of transfer fee, Calvert-Lewin is a very experienced Premier League striker, and a former England international as well. I say former because he's not going to get into the squad until he starts being a bit more consistent in terms of goal scoring. And I've said it on previous videos. I quite like what Calvert-Lewin's doing so far. He's winning a lot of headers. He's getting in good positions. He just needs to score more. It's that simple. He's a number 9, and he's getting. I would say there's just about enough service coming into him. He could do with a little more, but I would say that he's, with the chances he's had, he could have had 4 or 5 goals this season already. Yeah, and a striker, like a top quality striker would, if a top quality striker would have had the exact chances that Calvert-Lewin has had this season so far, a top quality striker would have been on 4, 5, maybe 6 goals by now. I mean, maybe this is an indication of where Leeds are at in terms of squad quality. Again, you can use the whole thing of we've only just come back up again. Maybe this is the best that we can expect right now. But if these goal scoring opportunities aren't scored, they are going to come to bite us in the backside, and it's going to put us in a bit of trouble. And I don't want Leeds to be in trouble. I want us to get these points on the board. In one of my other videos, I looked at Leeds' fixtures in blocks of 6 after we'd played the first 6 games. And I'm fairly certain I put lost next to this one. But based on how we played, we shouldn't have lost. But again, it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda moment. End of the day, we've lost. We take the positives of a very good effort. Let's just put it that way. It's a very good effort from the boys. Right? They're clearly trying hard. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But based on how the match went, today was for the taking. It really was. So let's finish up by looking at the Premier League table then. I'll just have to come out of that slightly in 1 second. And again. I just want to get it so I can get the entire table on the screen. It'll just be a second here, folks. That should do it. That'll do. Slightly cut off at the top, but you get the idea of it. So as you can see, there's only been about half of the teams that have played so far for this particular match week. And as you can see there at the moment, Liverpool are on course for their second loss of the season, if they keep that scoreline up. Chelsea are on course for their third win of the season. Arsenal got a 2-0 win against West Ham, no real surprises there. Manure beat Sunderland 2-0. I don't know. In general terms, you would probably have said, right, yeah, that would have, you'd expect that. But that would be from a Manure team of a few seasons ago, not the one of this season. And ironically, Sunderland are still ahead of Manure even now. From Leeds' point of view, currently sitting 13th, which again, if we finish 13th at end of season, hell, I'm taking that. That would be an excellent return to the Premier League for Leeds if we finish if we finish as high as 13th. Do I think at this moment in time that we're finishing that high? Remains to be seen. Still very, very early on. We're not even a quarter of the way through the season just yet. So it is still very, very early days. And again, if you look at some of the opposition that we've faced now, Everton, ever present in the Premier League. Arsenal, how many years have they qualified for Champions League? Newcastle, they've played in Champions League and European competition recently. How many seasons have Wolves been in the Premier League now? How many seasons have Bournemouth been in the Premier League now? Same with Fulham. And then obviously today we've played Tottenham. Again, how many times have they been in European competition of some description? You know, it's been a very tough running so far. You know, you could maybe argue, you know, possibly Bournemouth and Wolves and Fulham is slightly weaker, but then when you look at those other teams, as I say, you've got a Premier League ever present in Everton, and then you've got a couple of teams, or three teams that have been playing European football in recent seasons. So, you know, there is an element of a very tough start fixture wise. So to say that Leeds, you know, when you look at it, you know, 2 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses, it's not a disaster after this particular start of the season, but you look at those 3 games where we could and probably should have gotten some points from. You know, you could argue that Leeds are 4 points short of what they should have right now. Maybe even 5 or 6, which is crazy. You know, if we'd had that much, we would be up in about 5th. And even with an additional 4 points, we're still up in the top half. But it is what it is. We've just got to hope that, you know, there's, as you can see there, quite a few of the teams below us currently are still to play. You know, Brentford, Newcastle, Villa, Forest, Burnley and Wolves are all still to play. I mean, by the looks of it, the lowest that we can drop would be 17th after this match week. So we're still not going to be in relegation zone, even if the worst case scenario comes about. And then the next 2 games after that are 2 teams that are currently in the relegation zone, Burnley and West Ham. We have to beat, for me, to kind of, you know, to kind of what's the phrase I'm looking for? To kind of recover, if you like, from this particular loss today. I really feel we need to win those 2 games. Now, two wins in the next 2 games, it's obviously 6 points, so that has put us on 14. I think that by that point, that puts us in the top half. Judging by what points the top half have got at the minute, I think that if we get 6 points from the next 2 games, putting us on 14. You know, 14 is currently where Bournemouth is in 4th place. So I'd be hopeful that 2 wins in the next 2 games would propel us into the top half. At the very least, the top of the bottom half. I really don't see us being any lower than that. After that point, so. But again, rather than thinking too far ahead, we've got to get. You know, we've got to earn those points. Based on how we've performed against some of these, you know, more established teams, when we face Burnley, you know, we've got to put them to the sword. We really have. We've really got to win that game. And then same with West Ham. You know, Burnley and West Ham, they're both in relegation zone. They're both on 4 points. You know, they've both currently got half what we've got. You could argue Burnley's had a tough run in so far. They have. West Ham, I'm not sure on theirs. And West Ham are on 4 points, but they've played a game more than Burnley so far. So, you know, from a Leeds perspective, it's slightly worrying, just for the fact that we've played very decently and come away with nothing. But then on the flip side of it all, before a ball was kicked, I think there'd have been a lot of Leeds fans that wouldn't have been sure of Leeds getting anything from this game. As I say, before a ball was kicked, my heart was saying 2-1 Leeds, my head was saying 1-1. And now on the balance of play, looking at how the match panned out and how we played, you know, we were worthy of one of those two results, in my opinion, or even a 2-2 draw at the end of it, if you like. But it is a loss. We've got to move on. But there is the opportunity, coming up against two teams that are near the bottom of the table. There's an opportunity to get 6 points in the next two games based on who our opposition is. We've just got to be more clinical when we get those chances. We're making chances now, which is really good. If I'm going to take a positive from all of this, we are starting to make chances, and we've just got to start scoring them. That's my concern. Can we score enough goals? As I say, we've scored 6 goals in the last 3 games, which is decent. But on the flip side of that, we've started conceding goals, and prior to that, we weren't conceding goals. So it's almost like, and I don't know if this is maybe what's gone on, in the coaching training sessions, but has something been said where, Daniel Farkas said to all the players, we need to attack more. We're not going to stay up if we don't start scoring goals. So the team has started to do that in recent times. But do they need reminding that they've got to still keep it tight at the back? I don't know. But another international break now, which really pees me off. I'm sick of them. They shouldn't have international breaks in a season. They really shouldn't. It's never going to bloody change, obviously. But I couldn't give a flying feckadoodle-doo. I'm trying not to swear too much on my streams or my videos. But it really is crap. It really is. But it's a long old wait now to try and make up for losing today. But if we play against Burnley and we beat them, and we play against West Ham and we beat them, all of a sudden things look considerably better. A minimum 4 points is required from the next 2 games, I think. Minimum 4 points. I think anything less, based on who the 2 fixtures are against, and the seasons that they've had so far, anything less I think would be seen as a bit of a failure. We've proven that we can nearly beat teams at the top. So if we can nearly beat teams at the top, we really need to beat teams at the bottom. Of which we've done with Wolves. We beat Wolves, and we drew against Newcastle. They're both below Leeds in the table, so we're unbeaten against teams below us currently. So let's see how things go. But apologies for it being a bit negative, folks. I'm just it always gets me down when Leeds lose a match. And when you play quite well, and the statistics suggest that you were the better team, yeah, it's hard to take. But big thank you for watching. Do please give the video a like. Pop your opinions on the match in the comments down below. I'd be really interested to see what you thought of the match. If you saw the match, what did you think of it? Do you think that Leeds have shown enough so far to suggest that they can stay up in the Premier League this season? I think we're showing signs that we can. We're showing signs that we can be competitive. But being competitive, is that enough? We need to convert that competitiveness into results, into wins and draws. We can't afford to lose too many, to give ourselves the best chance of staying up. But yeah, I'll leave it there, folks. We're approaching 3/4 of an hour, so big thanks for all the support. As I say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Plenty more football and video game content coming up, and yeah, do please give the video a like as well, it really helps. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.